Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan. Welcome to the Cameron Journal Newshour. We have so much going on right now. This isn't as bad as some weeks. It's not as bad as some weeks, but oh boy, it's definitely busy. We have a lot to to talk about. Of course, the minute I stop talking, I've been recording all day. So I've done 2 recordings. I was supposed to do 3. One person didn't show up, kind of, thank God. But I also recorded 6 videos today. So we're going to croak together through this news hour. I want to remind everyone that my new event. This is the wrong overlay right now. We'll come back to that. My new event, the Cameron Journal Salons, is coming up this Wednesday, or Thursday. I'm sorry, this Thursday. At 7 p.m. I'm talking with David Beckemeyer and everybody about outrage journalism, how outrage became the business model of modern media. David Beckemeyer is going to be there. Michelle Stiles is going to be there. Terry Whalen's going to be there. Barry Marr, national syndicated newspaper columnist, is going to be there. All your favorite guests are coming Wednesday or Thursday. Wednesday, it's Thursday. Thursday, it's a virtual salon. For details and how to sign up for that, check the description of this video. But you can if you're looking for a specific invite, you can always email me. Email at CameronJournal.com. I'll get an invite out to you. There is a link running around if you check my social media at Cameron Cowan on all social media. I've been posting about it a lot. It's also in this past Saturday's newsletter as well. But yes, so this is all coming up. And it's going to be a really great event. A lot of emails have been going out. So if you're subscribed to the newsletter, and you should be, you definitely have been seeing this event. And we're very much looking forward to that on Thursday. I'm going to get that right eventually. Thursday, May 7th, 7 p.m. It is a private event. The Cameron Journal salons are always private. It is a private event. The webpage I have is not easy to say over here, so there's going to be a link in the description of this video. But if you're watching this live right now and it's not in the description yet, which it isn't, send me an email at CameronJournal.com, and I will get a private invite out to you to this private event. It's an intimate evening of chat and conversation. We're going to be talking about outrage journalism. I do feel a little bad for my friends on the West Coast. It's at 7, which is 4 o'clock for them, and it's too early. I got a lot of texts today. People are kind of like, oh, I want to come, but I have a doctor's. I've got to this, I've got to that, because it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon for them. So I feel sorry for the West Coast. I may at some point need to do a West Coast event that's at 9 o'clock for them to all be done with the day and everything. But, yeah. So that's happening. If you haven't subscribed to the Cameron Journal newsletter, you should, and you can do that one of 2 ways. You can sign up at CameronJournal.substack.com if you're already on Substack and don't want another account. If you want to sign up, if you don't care about the Substack thing, that's great. Go to CameronJournal.com/newsletter, and you can subscribe right at CameronJournal.com, which is really great. This past Saturday, we covered a lot of stuff, and so thank you everyone for reading and opening and clicking. And I do hope to see you at the salon on Thursday. I hope to see you in the newsletter. And by the way, I don't say this enough necessarily, but by the way, I love feedback. Like, if you're feeling like I'm just kind of broadcasting here and you don't need to or want to engage or whatever have you, I love feedback. So make sure to write into the show, and you can do so at that same email that I have for invites to the salon. It's just email at CameronJournal.com, and you can write into the show. I love to get feedback if there's a story that you've heard about that you're just desperate to know about or have me cover. Email at CameronJournal.com. Write in. I love feedback. I appreciate feedback always and forever. So with all of that, lots of housekeeping this week. Social media, newsletter, salon on Thursday. Let's switch to the headlines. And the first one it's not really a headline, it's more of a sad cultural commentary on our times. But this segment is called 24 Hours in a Day. And I kind of came across, well, let me set this up. So I came across this tweet from Akash Gupta, and I was just noticing the comments and how people were reacting to it. And I'm very curious to see what people here might say about all of this, because it's an interesting idea that the 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, 8 hours of sleep math doesn't necessarily make sense anymore the same way that it once did. So let's read. The math on a 24-hour day stopped working decades ago, and most people just never run the numbers. 8 hours sleep, 8 hours work, that's 16 before anything else. Add the modern requirements that nobody counts. 1 hour of real exercise, 30 minutes of getting ready and showering, 30 to 90 minutes of commute, cooking and eating 3 meals, or shopping, prepping for them is 90 minutes minimum if you're being honest. Dishes, laundry, basic household upkeep, hygiene, and packing tomorrow's bag is another hour. That's 5 to 6 hours of obligations the original framework never accounted for. Running total 21 to 22 hours. With a 45-minute one-way commute and a real kitchen, you have under 90 minutes left. Inside that window, you're supposed to read books, see friends, date, pursue hobbies, learn skills, watch the shows everyone references at work, and call your parents. The 8 hours labor, 8 hours recreation, 8 hours rest framework comes from Robert Owen in 1817, written for a factory worker who walked to the mill, ate whatever was in front of him, and didn't lift weights. He kept his arithmetic and added 5 hours of modern obligations on top. The people who appear to have it all are doing one of 5 things: outsourcing domestic labor to a spouse or paid help, cutting sleep, cutting exercise, having no kids, or living in a 30 square meter apartment with no maintenance burden, usually multiple. The math is not the same for everyone, and the cuts are just hidden. The honest answer is, you choose. Most people cut sleep and pay for it in cognition. Some cut exercise and pay for it in long-term health. The cultured ones cut the culture and read 5 books a year instead of 30. There is no version where you don't choose. And he reacted to this one tweet from, it was actually originally in Japanese, and it says here, like, the person says, lately I've made a habit to get 8 hours of sleep and an hour of exercise every day, but doing this means that even in a workplace with no overtime, I truly have absolutely no time left on weekdays for anything besides work and life basics, and I'm starting to feel like maybe a healthy, cultured lifestyle and work are just ridiculously incompatible. Yeah, and so this was this was his response, and it's really quite true. I mean, people kind of forget that the original, 18-hour, the original, 8 hours of work was because a wife, and it was a wife, a woman, not a husband, it was a woman, was the one taking care of the domestic side. She was cleaning the house, vacuuming, doing the child care, dealing with kids going to school, all that sort of thing. So all the man really had to focus on, and yes, it was usually men, until recently, had to worry about was work. As my Nana always says jokingly, every working person needs a wife. And so that worked in a culture where everyone was married, and women, unless they were very poor, tended to stay home and work from home, or they were able to do paid labor at home, like taking in laundry, cleaning, all this type of thing. That, and so the reality is you cannot do it all on your own by yourself, and you were never intended to, and so and I run into this all the time because I work a lot, and it has definitely killed a lot of relationships in my life, and it has definitely been a huge problem because I get up, I roll over, flip on my phone, and I'm on email within 5 minutes of waking up. I told you we're gonna croak. I am yeah, I have not done laundry in a hot minute. Thank goodness I work from home. Pulling together all this, and then I'm usually at the desk working for anytime between 8 to 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours a day, and that doesn't even get into other side stuff that I'm doing, whatever errands that need to be run. And I keep my life pretty simple, and I don't have a ton of housing maintenance right now because of where I live. Like, when I'm living by myself and there's the kitchen to deal with and cleaning to do and all this type of thing, it just, yeah, it will kill all of your time. And so you end up being very busy and not having any time to just be, just read, just date, whatever have you. And so if you're feeling that it's just not sustainable, for most people, and all this type of thing, it's a real thing. And as I'm looking through all of the suggestions, none of them are really any good. This person says, simple, create your own work that only requires 4 hours per day. Anyone that runs a business will tell you that's really not possible. Even if you have staff, they need stuff. Emails need answer. That whole, just work 4 hours a day is a lie. I mean, I suppose unless you're in real estate or something where it's not all the time, you might be able to get away with that. But that's not going to be most people. And anybody who's actually making money working for themselves will tell you that. It's, this person says the working day should cut to 6 hours. I agree. Yeah, some person mentioned they took a pay cut and they're going down to 32 hours a week, sort of thing. And this person brings up a lot of things that I think eat a lot of time. You didn't count paying bills, shopping for insurance, organizing the home, contacting insurance, looking for new appliances, fixing broken things at home, answering email, and the big one, taking care of children or other dependents. I have a lot of I'm at the age now where I have a lot of friends with aging parents. And some people are in full-time care duties. And if you're in the sandwich generation where you have children and older parents, and you're trying to manage your health care and doctors, your children's health care and doctors, your older parents' health care doctors, and all their medications, you have no time. You have no time. I even remember that with my mom when she was when she was dealing with my grandfather. He was in a facility, and he was full-time. I mean, it was like a full-time job dealing with him, his paperwork, medications, all this type of thing. She was at that place several times a month. It was a lot. And every time she would go, she would call me just to talk about it and decompress. And I would just sit there on the phone and be kind of like, yeah, Mom, I know. And towards the end, I got pulled, right before he died, I got pulled into it too. But, yeah, it's a lot, it's a lot. This person, I did love their suggestion. He says, don't commute. That's hard to do in this day and age. Don't shower daily. Unnecessary. I would agree with that. Eat only 2 meals per day. Definitely agree with that. I only eat about twice a day. Exercise only 3 or 4 days a week. More not necessary. Yeah, when I used to be a 4-day-a-week gym rat, that was very time-consuming. It kind of became my whole lifestyle. If I got back into the gym very seriously, beyond my just kind of calisthenics and stretching I do at home, I would probably do 1 or 2 days a week. So it's, this person says, I have a 15-minute drive. I work from 8 to 4. I will work out 1 to 2 hours per day. I have hours of free time. Having a short commute honestly is the clutchiest thing. I've had both. So I've had a very long commute, a very short commute. Having a short commute to work saves you so much time. You have so much more bandwidth. Because I would leave work, and be like, okay, I'm feeling good, blah blah blah, and I'd be leaving work at like 4:30, and I'm like, okay, I got like an hour and a half home, feeling good, and by the time you get home, it's 6:30, 7 o'clock, absolutely just tired, like, and you have, and you got to be in bed to get up the next day, so it's literally grab clothes, do your lunch and food, turn around, and it's basically bedtime. By the time you get everything by the time you eat something, get tomorrow prepped, get everything together, you're ready for bed. And that's the reality during the week for a lot of people, is commuting takes up so much time. That's why people will pay so much to move a little bit closer to where their job is, because the commute time is just so huge. But um I do love people that are kind of like, oh, just meal prep for 2 hours on Sunday for the whole week. You don't have kids. I can tell you don't have kids. That's great when you're single or a couple and you can agree, but your 5-year-old is not going to be kind of like, oh yeah, pass the chicken and rice. He's going to want a quesadilla. He's going to want a hot dog, and there goes your meal prep for the, yeah. So anyway, I thought I would start on that. It's a little lifestyle thing, little lifestyle post that I thought was very important. And if, let me know if you're feeling the same. And don't forget to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're watching this on. Anyway, let's get to the more real stuff. This came in from the Manhattan Institute in their City Journal newsletter today. And I thought this was interesting. And there's this new piece of legislation called the Dignity Act. And it aims to kind of do amnesty, the 86 Amnesty 2.0. And it says here, you can't blame some Republicans for being skeptical of any bill offering legal status to those who entered the United States illegally. But conservatives risk squandering a rare opportunity if they don't engage with Representative Maria Elvira Salazar's Dignity Act and its 20 Republican co-sponsors. If toughened, the bill could be congressional Republicans' best chance to prevent a future Democratic president from repeating the Biden administration's failures at the southern border and fix immigration once and for all. While not ideal, the Dignity Act is far closer to President Trump's immigration agenda than critics on the right acknowledge. It would grow the economy, reduce the federal deficit, and expand opportunities for Americans. Immigration reform without enforcement is amnesty, and to its credit, the Dignity Act mandates E-Verify for all employers in America, compelling them to check the immigration status of every hire. That alone would do more to cut off the jobs magnet for illegal immigrants and encourage self-deportation than any other proposal. The bill also strengthens criminal penalties for illegal immigrants, and it curbs large-scale categorical parole, one of the policies most abused by the Biden administration. Under the bill's provisions, no future president would be able to admit hundreds of thousands of migrants by executive fiat at the southern border. This is exactly what Republicans wanted to achieve through H.R. 2, which received no Democratic support. In addition, the Dignity Act expands high-skilled legal immigration in ways conservatives should welcome. It clears the irrational decades-long green card backlogs for high-skilled immigrants already approved under current law, and expands future legal high-skilled immigration by exempting spouses of minor children from employment-based visa caps. Because of the resultant influx of talent, the Dignity Act would reduce the national debt by over $4.5 trillion in the next 3 decades while growing the economy. The bill gets another conservative win by closing the FICA, Federal Insurance Contributions Act, tax loophole for international students with work permits. It also broadens dual intent for student and other temporary visas, creating a more rational path for immigrants with U.S.-based advanced degrees in STEM fields to stay and contribute to the American economy. This last reform is was one for which President Trump is specifically called. The bill's most controversial provision among conservatives grants legal status to millions of illegal immigrants who arrived before Biden took office in 2021. It's understandable why some would recoil from legalizing millions of illegal immigrants, but unlike other proposals, this one is not a path to citizenship, and it is not cost-free. Participants would have to pay $1,000 in restitution every year and also face a 1% surtax on their income. They must also repay tax debts, remain employed, avoid crime, and be excluded from welfare or lose their legal status. Those terms are far tougher than the blanket amnesties that immigration activists usually demand. In fact, the requirements to screen out criminals, welfare dependents, and those too poor to pay the fee and surtax. Still, the bill has many flaws. Dignity participants are exempted from paying the employee side of payroll taxes in exchange for never receiving federal entitlements, including Social Security and Medicare. The raised revenue that should go primarily to deficit reduction is instead allocated to an ineffective federal job training program. The bill, while boosting funding for border security, also excludes ICE from enforcing the law in so-called sensitive locations, which risks creating the de facto no-go zones for immigration enforcement. Congressional conservatives should use the Dignity Act as a base from which to build. With the border more secure than ever before, they can consolidate President Trump's immigration agenda into law, implement a tough public charge rule, push for less chain migration, abolish the diversity visa lottery, and impose tougher limits on temporary protected status. They should also write limits into the law so the Biden border catastrophe is never repeated. Republicans can and should push for a higher legalization fee and no FICA tax exemptions for anyone, and $10,000 annual dignity program fee instead of the current $1,000 would ensure that only those immigrants who truly contribute to the economy get to stay while raising even more revenue. Farm workers, the thousand. Such a pay for legal status scheme would reduce the debt by more than $700 billion over the next decade, and any final compromise should include reductions to family-based immigration, especially categories with little connection to productivity or the national interest. Given the risk that Democrats will soon to retake Congress, this session is likely the last opportunity to pair permanent enforcement with long overdue legal immigration reform. Otherwise, conservatives risk ceding the entire issue to the next Democratic administration, which will have plenty of room to undo Trump's success. I think the writer's idea of raising it to $10,000 so we only keep the most productive STEM people is a nice idea, but that will screw over farmers and farm workers. Because that would be half of a farm worker's income every year. Although, if they were legal and they were getting paid more, that might be more sustainable. But if they're making $725, they're going to clear $27,000 a year. They would then be on the hook for $10,000 of that, sort of thing. I think the point this writer is trying to make is make it so we only keep the most productive ones, but here's the problem. You have a farm worker shortage. We're already feeling it, and automation is going to help a lot of that, but it's not going to help it entirely. Making the fee $1,000, I think, would give people a chance to have that legal opportunity, and go from there. So that it's the weird kind of technical thing, but yeah, I mean, I like the broad idea. I think their analysis that, Republicans should get behind it, I think is definitely a good one. Their suggestions are kind of silly. But this, giving people a pathway to a legal status is good. I think an on-ramp to some sort of legal status and then onward to naturalization would also be good. But it's also very obvious that, like many other developed countries, we are looking to only take the really good immigrants a la Canada or Australia and not just be a location anyone can go to anymore, which means we really are living in 1925 again. So, moving on from immigration, I didn't change my graphic as I usually don't. Moving on from immigration, let's talk about Graham Plattner. That's WhatsApp, wrong app. Let's talk about Mr. Graham Plattner. So, and so for those of you who don't closely follow the main gubernatorial race, there was a screenshot going around. It's this here. This is your next candidate for governor in Maine, everyone. And the controversy was around this particular chest tattoo. This is a skull and two crossbones here and here. You can't see it very well, and every image I've seen of this is not that high resolution, because I think he was streaming or something and the resolution just wasn't there. And so there's another, I don't think it's in this thread, but there's another one that shows the cover-up that he got over it. And here is also where it compares the original tattoo with the SS bolts on either side to the one that he had, but there's no SS bolts on it. And Crystal Ball from Crystal and Cigar said Graham Plattner's flawless victory against the sitting Schumer-backed governor of Maine shows what a new day it is in the Dem Party. He survived the Oppo dump of all Oppo dumps, and it didn't even slow him down. Voters demand candidates who oppose oligarchs and genocide. Okay, Crystal, fair enough. Here's the thing. I wouldn't necessarily automatically think, despite the similarity in symbology, that it would necessarily mean he was a Nazi or that was he was going for. As I told someone, and if there's one thing I know from researching these groups and interviewing people who are into white supremacy and white nationalism and all this sort of thing, if you're marking your body with this symbology, one, you've got more than just a chest tattoo. It's arms, legs, back, chest, all over. Also, there's affiliations. You're part of organizations. You're part of groups. People know that you have some extreme political opinions. And for a lot of those guys, that's their entire social circle. Like, you know, that's the world they travel and exist in. And if one of them came out and started running for office in a high-profile position, we would not have waited this long to find out. I think a lot of people are mistaking this situation as not understanding white working-class culture. In so much as Punisher masks, skulls, this is all stuff that people will put on every toolbox, every truck window, tattoos. I used to own a tattoo shop briefly. This is normal. All this sort of thing. I would only be concerned that he was somehow a secret Nazi if someone was saying, oh yeah, he was part of this group, he was part of this motorcycle club, he was part of this organization. He was associating himself with people who have known white supremacist or white nationalist tendencies, all this type of thing. This all started over a picture of a tattoo. He could have gotten this as a piece of flash art at a tattoo shop and never known what the bigger symbology was or where it came from, or that other people who are affiliated with those types of organizations use that as a symbol. Because again, where's the receipts? Where's the affiliations? Where's, you know, who knows him? What organization was in? We don't have any of that stuff. Probably, I'm going to venture to say, because it doesn't exist. Which means he's not really a Nazi, he's a dude with a tattoo, who then immediately went out and got it covered up later on when someone told him what it was. He himself admitted no one even knew, had no clue what it was until he went to DC, and some national people were kind of like, whoa, you need to do something about that. Like, I genuinely think it was ignorance, not malice. Never mistake ignorance for malice. It's a very important thing to do. And so, and yeah, I mean, and I think voters do want a different type of candidate. I do think they want someone who opposes oligarchs and genocide. They want a candidate who's in line, who's a Democrat, who's in line with their values. And also, here's the other thing. If he was really affiliated with those organizations, he would not have gone out and covered it up and then showed off how he got it covered up. This is a non-scandal, but it's somehow tearing the party apart. And if you want proof of this, let's check the comments. It says, apparently Maine voters want a rabid candidate who's posing as a punching up progressive. The character behind the tattoos will reveal itself immediately if, God forbid, the wackos in Maine elect him. And someone is this one supporting. It says, I think this guy's presidential material. He's a white Christian man with Jewish roots and middle-class family values. He can resonate very well with the southern states. Plus, he also has a strong socialist values and calls out Israel for the genocide, which can rally the Democratic voters. If the Democratic Party is smart, they'll recognize the changing landscape and start preparing this campaign. And then we have New Day equals complete public embracing of a Nazi-supporting misogynist. The mask has been completely removed. I don't want to hear any more complaints about Trump's proclivities. New Day is Democrats supporting an actual card-carrying fascist Nazi complete with tattoo. Again, I don't think that's the situation. Plantner didn't win because he's some political wonder boy. He won because Mills lost in the wake of how awful administration has been, and she's massively unlikable. It's embarrassing that Plantner and Mills were the best candidates Maine Dems could come up with. It's, and so it just goes, With people is, oh, Napo dumped the man as a white nationalist and a misogynist. Again, where's his affiliations? These guys are all affiliated with something, by the way. You don't just find them out in the wild. They flock together. There's no affiliations. Otherwise, this would all start coming out, sort of thing. He's a Nazi who said rape victims need to be held accountable. Thank you once again for all your proclamations. We're fake AF. 2026 Democrats, everyone is racist except a candidate that made racist comments. Everyone's a misogynist except a candidate that told women to stop drinking and wear Kevlar underwear if they were worried about getting raped. Everyone's a Nazi except the candidate has a Nazi SS tattoo. Nice work. You know, and it goes on and on and on. You know, with the Totenkopf tattoo and all this sort of thing. Yeah. So it's a very sad the senator with the Nazi tattoo, a Graham Plattner thriller. I hadn't seen that. That's funny. So yeah. And he doesn't have it anymore. He got it covered up. Yeah, it's you know, and yeah, and he's also a vet, which he probably means he probably got it at some tattoo shop on some deployment somewhere. Anyway, the Graham Plattner Nazi tattoo story is a non-story. Like that's again, WhatsApp. What's going on? Why am I keep getting WhatsApp? Ecamm, thank you. A non-story. You know, he's probably going to do very well for himself in Maine. And actually, I said he's running for governor. He's running for Senate. Yeah. But speaking of voting, let's get into the Voting Rights Act. I wrote about this on the newsletter on Saturday. And, oh yeah, we can let this go. And it was a lot. I don't want to start with the New York Times. I want to start here with Christopher Webb, who's an independent journalist I love. So for those of you that don't know, the Voting Rights Act was passed as part of a package of legislation in 1964 extending voting rights to African Americans and other minority groups and changing how we handle civil rights in this country. One of the things it did, that the Supreme Court's already gotten rid of, is the federal government supervised election policies, voting, and redistricting in southern states so that black voters would not be disenfranchised. Another part of that was that districts had to be racially fair so that you would have districts that were majority black in a state. You couldn't split up a state's districts in such a way that large areas of African American votes got split across several districts, and therefore the voting power gets divided among all these districts so that certain people always win every single time. The Supreme Court last week decided to get rid of the requirement that districts be racially fair as much as they're competitive in a gerrymandering situation, and they have reinterpreted the Voting Rights Act so that to prove a district has been racially gerrymandered, they've set the standard for it to be clear intent, which is so impossibly high, no one will admit to doing it. But the reality is a lot of states can take their large urban centers and district them apart in such a way that black voters will never be able to get a representative of their own in a district because all of the black voters are split across all the different districts. This already happened in Utah with Salt Lake City, where they gerrymandered it in such a way that the voting blocks in Salt Lake City were all broken up. Ironically, this is going to kind of bite them because they ended up making all their districts very competitive in Utah. So there's like no more safe Republican seats in Utah. In the South, what they used to do before the VRA was make sure when you had masses of black people living in some place that they weren't all in the same district so that their voting power would be diffuse. At that time, before the realignment in 1972, that was Democrats doing that. This is pre-1972, pre-political realignment. A lot of black voters tended to vote Democrat at that time. That trend had started in 1929 after the flood of the Mississippi River. But what they didn't want is they did not want white voters represented by someone black. So they districted other states in such a way to prevent that outcome from happening. After the VRA came in, the federal government supervised the drawing of the districts, and that allowed districts that, as time goes on, happen to be Democrat, but also were sometimes a majority black district and would send a black representative to Congress. Knowing all of that, knowing the history, now we get to Christopher Webb talking about, quoting the decision from the opinion, where Justice Alito says, in large part because of the Voting Rights Act, our nation has made great strides in eliminating racial discrimination in voting, Alito wrote, and if as a result of this progress, it is hard to find pertinent evidence relating to intentional present-day voting discrimination, that is cause for celebration. And then Chris Webb goes on to say, that's a lie, it's meant to deceive. It's meant to give the court cover for a decision rooted in white nationalism. If you needed any more proof that the Voting Rights Act is still necessary, just look at what's happening right now. Red states rushing to wipe out black representation. The second SCOTUS gutted it. What we're watching isn't subtle. Protections get stripped and the response is immediate. Not years later, not gradual, immediate. That should tell you exactly why those protections exist in the first place. And there is something to that. Louisiana has paused its primary to and this was announced this morning, it's on the front page of the New York Times. They announced today they're pausing their primary is already happening to redistrict their districts to fix this map. Florida already has a new map threading its way through their legislature in Tallahassee. They're not even waiting. So the New York Times did an example of how the districts were in 2024, which was the last election, and in Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Florida. And then it shows what redistricting could look like. Not the way it will be, but what it could look like. And that will gain Republicans 13 new seats, leaving small pockets of blue in Atlanta, Raleigh, Durham, and South Florida. And a little bit of Orlando. And that's what it could look like, which would gain Republicans 13 seats. Obviously, a lot has changed since 1964 in which party is doing this. I also want to mention at this moment, every party gerrymanders. Which is why I love an independent commission, especially in a state like Wisconsin, which has structurally created it impossible for Democrats to win in their state legislature through gerrymandering. I like an independent commission. I like it to not be in the state legislature. I think that is a recipe for disaster. It always should be an independent commission, another group of people whose job it is to create fair, competitive districts. Because both parties, when either one of them is in power, gerrymandering goes on. There was already a big hubbub about Virginia because Virginia just redid its map and cut out a bunch of Republicans in response to Republicans trying to gerrymander in Indiana, where the state legislature said no, in Utah, where they were successful, all this sort of thing. There's been a whole kind of mid-decade redraw of congressional maps, sort of unnecessarily, all in a matter of politicking. And so Chris Webb goes on and he says, and yet the reaction is muted. Here's the uncomfortable truth. A lot of white Americans are not having the conversations they need to be having with each other. In black families and communities, these conversations are constant. They aren't optional. They're passed down. They're how we survive. We talk about voting. We compare notes. Who's on the ballot? What do they actually stand for? What policies affect our lives, our schools, our housing, our safety? Is this proposition on the ballot good, or are they playing us for fools? What decisions protect us? Which ones put us more at risk? That didn't start with us. That was taught to us. I vote because my great-grandparents couldn't. I vote because my great-grandfather sent his children north just to access an integrated education. I vote because my grandfather moved west chasing opportunity and still got locked out of housing he could afford. I vote because I live today in a neighborhood that was redlined, a place my family wouldn't have been allowed to live in within my mother's lifetime. That's not history to us, that's muscle memory, it's instruction. And that's why black voters, more often than not, vote with consistency. Not because we all agree on everything, but because we understand what's at stake. We don't have the luxury of being single-issue voters. We literally have skin in the game. So when something like this week happens, we recognize the pattern immediately. The question is, does everyone else? Because if these same conversations were happening consistently in white households, at dinner tables, in group chats among friends, we'd be in a very different place as a country. If you want to help, start by listening to Black voices and amplify them, and join us. Now, I wanted to read that and talk about all of that because The history is important. I now want to bounce over to the proper reporting. It says here here we go. The effects will be significant. The ruling in Louisiana v. Calais makes it easier for states to draw districts for Congress, state legislatures, and local councils to elect candidates favored by white voting blocks. The officials who make the maps no longer need to worry much about whether they are sprinkling black voters across many districts and eliminating majority black districts. The reality is that in the name of disentangling race from politics, the Supreme Court has given white voters more power at the expense of racial minorities. We recognize that people of different races now vote more similarly than they once did. That is promising. But racially polarized voting remains common in much of Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and South Carolina, where black voters lean heavily Democratic and white voters lean heavily Republican. Because the Supreme Court has previously allowed partisan gerrymandering, those states will be free to draw districts that elect candidates whom only a small percentage of black voters support. Those politicians are also likely to be white. It is impossible not to notice the partisan nature of the ruling. The 6 justices on the majority are 6 nominated by Republican presidents, and they have most likely made it easier for the party to and likely made it easier for the party that chose them to still hold power in Congress. Wednesday's decision may shift 9 seats in southern states from Democratic to Republican hands, some in the 2026 cycle and more in years to come. The state legislatures and local bodies will surely tilt in the same direction. Justice Samuel Alito's majority opinion claims to merely update the redistricting test courts have used in Voting Rights Act cases for 40 years. It does so, he argues, by requiring that plaintiffs show a strong likelihood that the state was intentionally disempowering black votes. In reality, the decision has eviscerated the old standard because proving intent is extremely difficult. As a result, states will now be able to slice minority voters into small and powerless slivers, as long as they can claim to do so for partisan rather than racial reasons. Consider the effect in Louisiana. The state had no black representation in Congress for more than a century after the end of Reconstruction, and finally elected 1 black member in 1990. A second black member served from 1983 to 1987. In 2001, Louisiana redrew its map to revert to only 1 majority black congressional district out of 6, in a state where the black population is now about 1/3 of the total. This case began in 2022 when the state had only 1 black member of Congress, and a group of black voters sued over the state's map. The plaintiffs won in the lower courts based on extensive evidence of racially polarized voting, and Louisiana then redrew its map in 2024 to include 2 majority black congressional districts. A group of white voters sued over the new map. Now that the Supreme Court has sided with them, Louisiana is free to go back to its 2022 map, or to attempt a map with no realistic opportunity at all for black voters to elect candidates of their choice. As long as the state says it's trying to take power from Democrats and not black people, it will be on safe legal ground. Wednesday's result is not what Congress intended. When Congress amended the Voting Rights Act in 1982, it rejected requiring plaintiffs to prove intentional discrimination. The amended law instead required plaintiffs to prove that the political process, including redistricting, was not equally open to participation by a minority group in the sense that its members have less opportunity than other members of the electorate to participate in the political process and to elect representatives of their choice. A 1986 Supreme Court ruling fleshed out the standard if black voters were sufficiently numerous and compact, and if they also supported one party far more than white voters did, then the protections of the Voting Rights Act kicked in. That test was reasonable, and Wednesday's ruling has effectively replaced it. So much of what the ruling is upside down. In 2019, in a different case, Rucho v. Common Cause, the Supreme Court recognized an obvious truth: partisan gerrymandering is a problem for American democracy. But the majority then said that federal courts could not find a map unconstitutional because it was drawn for partisan reasons. As a result, restrictions on racial gerrymandering remain one of the biggest constraints on unfair redistricting, at least until Wednesday. The Supreme Court has used dubious reasoning to issue a ruling that will probably help the Republican Party and increase the number of white members of Congress and state legislatures. That ruling will lead to even more suspicion. The court prioritizes partisanship over principle. Yeah, this is a very tough thing. It's a very tough time. There's a lot of uncomfortable history, especially in the South, when it comes to voting and who's allowed to vote and why. And these measures were meant to fix, repair, and replace those unequal access to so many of those things. And we've watched so many of the protections that are meant to give greater access and greater equality in society simply disappear, whether it's affirmative action, the voting rights ruling, all of this, it's all slowly but surely being undone. And what does that mean for us? What does that mean for our society? What does that mean for an equitable democracy moving forward? I think it's more in danger than any of us really want to think about or admit. And Chris Webb is right. These are the type of conversations that tend to happen in brown and black communities that tend not to happen in white communities. And I know that because I travel in both worlds. And it's a lot of people may look at this and it's like, oh, it's like, well, we've made progress. We don't need this stuff anymore. And I'm kind of like, we've made progress. We have, and we sometimes don't look over our shoulder and recognize the progress that we have made. But the reality is that this still matters. This still is important, and we need to end gerrymandering and get it out of state legislatures and have independent boards working on this rather than always it being a partisan fight. And reframing this as a partisan fight is okay as long as you're not racial with it, wink wink nod nod, is it makes democracy less fair. So I feel very sorry for Democrats in the South. I feel sorry for black voters in the South who are a little less franchised today than they were last week. So, speaking of controversy, though, let's get into the Biden administration. Will you use the word persecuting Christians around abortion? So one of the things people don't understand, this whole idea that the Biden administration was persecuting Christians was a big narrative on the right wing. Big narrative. And it became this, before we get into what the Justice Department said and what the Catholics have said about all this, because it also crosses into abortion, and it also gets into them investigating certain churches because of extreme members there. I have to say at the very start of this, the idea of the government persecuting Christians is a very deep wound within Christianity that recalls the 1st, 2nd, 3rd century church before Christianity became the state religion of Rome. In evangelical circles, it is a constant fear and paranoia that powers a lot of their desire for political power. And you see this in evangelical sects, even things like Worldwide Church of God, these other denominations. A lot of their voting as a bloc is to prevent mythical persecution that's protected by the First Amendment and rarely happens. And so this report from the Justice Department and the coverage about it is primarily to reinforce a narrative that I grew up with in evangelical circles. There was always this great fear that one day in the future, if we don't vote a certain way, they'll come for us and stop us from going to church, and they'll take us from our homes just for who we believe in. And so this further cements and reinforces that narrative. And as we get into the details, everybody listening to this is going to have their own opinion over whether this is a good idea or not. Let's get our facts straight before we pass judgment. So we'll start with what the government has to say. It says here, today the Justice Department's Weaponization Working Group published a report detailing the Biden administration's weaponization of the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances FACE Act. Based on a review of 700,000 internal records, the report not only details specific ways the Biden Justice Department weaponized federal law, but also outlines the corrective action taken by the current Justice Department to right the wrongs of the prior administration. This department will not tolerate a two-tiered system of justice, said Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. No department should conduct selective prosecution based on beliefs. The weaponization that happened under the Biden administration will not happen again as we restore integrity to our prosecutorial system. President Trump promised to end the weaponization of the federal government. Too many Americans' prosecutions under the FACE Act have been the prototypical example of this weaponization. The Justice Department conducted a thorough review of internal discussions, case files, and prosecutorial decisions under the Act and concludes that the Biden DOJ weaponized the FACE Act in several ways. And they are as follows. The Biden DOJ closely collaborated with pro-abortion groups to track pro-life activists' First Amendment activity. Pro-abortion groups, especially the National Abortion Federation, Planned Parenthood, and Feminist Majority Foundation, capitalized on their relationship with the Biden DOJ to gain internal information and push targets for enforcement. These groups compiled evidence and dossiers that ultimately gave rise to search warrants and charges. The Biden DOJ affirmatively asked pro-abortion groups about pro-life individuals' travel and constitutionally protected advocacy. The Biden DOJ and career attorneys monitored pro-life activists for years before charging them. The Biden DOJ's prosecutors engaged in inappropriate conduct and comments. Prosecutors knowingly withheld evidence that defense counsel requested to prepare an affirmative defense, tried to screen out jurors based on religion, and authorized aggressive arrest tactics instead of allowing pro-life defendants to self-surrender. See, that's all bad. I'll go along with that's bad. The Biden DOJ helped a pro-abortion group secure funding. The lead prosecutor on each FACE Act prosecution served as a reference on the National Abortion Federation's application for a private grant. We found no record of ethics approval for the attorney to take an interest in the financial outcome of a party having business before the Biden DOJ. Also bad. The Biden DOJ pursued significantly harsher sentences for pro-life defendants than violent pro-abortion defendants. The Biden DOJ requested an average sentence of 26.8 months for the pro-life defendants compared to 12.3 months for pro-abortion defendants. The Biden DOJ violated the rights of Americans through its biased enforcement of the FACE Act. Though the act was supposed to protect both pro-choice and pro-life facilities, the Biden DOJ provided extensive support to abortion clinics while ignoring and downplaying vandalism and attacks against pregnancy resource centers. The Biden DOJ's actions were wrong. The Trump administration, acting Attorney General Todd Blanchard, are committed to rectifying these wrongs by taking the following actions. There's full and unconditional pardons. They've settled cases. The DOJ leadership has dismissed with prejudice 3 civil lawsuits against pro-life activists. The Trump DOJ issued a directive that moving forward, DOJ prosecutions may only bring abortion-related civil actions and prosecutions under the FACE Act in extraordinary circumstances or in cases presenting significant aggravating factors. And they did all this review. It says Daniel says the behavior unearthed in this report is shameful, said Assistant Attorney General Daniel Burrows, Office of Legal Policy. Lawyers who should have known better withheld evidence, worked to keep committed religious people off juries, and generally allowed the Department of Justice to be used as the enforcement arm of the pro-abortion special interests. DOJ is committed to prosecuting crime in a manner that is consistent with its mission to uphold the rule of law, to keep our country safe, and to protect civil rights. Should other affected individuals have concerns, DOJ will assess their allegations without fear or favor. And then there's 800 pages of exhibits and reports that are all here. We're not going to go through them, obviously, but it's all here. All 800 pages of it is here. So and it has the background and gets very much into the weeds on all of this. So, bearing all that in mind, the Catholic Review reports on all of this, quotes extensively from it, and it says here that in a Davison forwarded news articles about, it gets into the weeds a little bit about who was being gone after. According to the report, the department under Attorney General Merrick Garland, quote, pursued 3 FACE Act prosecutions involving pro-life victims and informed these pro-life groups. Because Kristen Clark and Civil Rights Division attorneys were unfamiliar with these groups, they struggled to identify how to describe the victims. Clark was unsure whether the anti-abortion folks called themselves pregnancy centers or pregnancy resource centers. The department closely coordinated with abortion providers and non-governmental organizations, particularly the National Abortion Federation, to identify pro-life targets for investigation and build cases against them. One of the pardoned pro-lifers, Goodman, in a statement provided to OSV News, responded, quote, the fight for justice is both practical and spiritual. Rescuers involved in the federal FACE Act and conspiracy cases now have a new opportunity to speak for the voiceless. As for Handy, the report says Davidson forwarded the FBI social media post from Handy about pro-life protests and know that the NAF was planning to alert other facilities in the area. It also says that, so it was reporting on it. We kind of know everything here, but it is definitely a big news for the anti-abortion crowd and the prosecutions that happened against them, and a lot was unfair. The prosecution withholding evidence from the defense is always a bad thing. I don't care what the circumstances are. And the fact that they have control over that is a huge flaw in our justice and that we should 110% fix. So this is an interesting aspect of the DOJ and finally cleaning up this this problem and how anti-abortion people were prosecuted under the Biden DOJ, and it seems like they were not necessarily treated very fairly at all. And so, yeah, and they were definitely pro-abortion groups definitely felt like they had a friend at the Biden DOJ and just forwarded information, and the DOJ took it from there in support of prosecuting these people unfairly. So, and obviously in conservative circles, this is a big issue. So, again, it further reinforces a narrative that is at the same time familiar, although not quite always what people say it is. So, however, speaking of that, though, while we're on the subject of Christians and persecutions and all this sort of thing, just gonna play this.
Aside from, like, the full removal of feminism, like, I just think so long as we have democracy coupled with universal suffrage, you will constantly be going against the grain. You're constantly going to have half of the population voting for temperance, tolerance.
Yes, you can't.
Suicidal empathy. And my point, I guess, is that I don't think you're going to get people to vote away democracy or vote away.
But it does happen.
It can. But my point is that I'm agreeing with you. I think that it has to be taken. I think that men, virtuous, ambitious, masculine men, have to climb the ladder of power and forcefully take away from the people that which is their detriment.
I saved this video because that link from the Catholics was not what I thought it was. The Biden DOJ about the abortion thing, there was another story, and the link was not here, and I didn't realize it until right now. There was another story I had in the shoe about, that I thought was that Catholic link, about Biden specifically looking at certain Orthodox Catholic churches because extremists were there, and that was going to be the next layer of the Biden's persecuting Christian sort of thing. And I wanted to mention the Christian nationalist pastor Joel Webbin for saying these types of things, because oftentimes, and this is especially true with Christian nationalism and other types, but a lot of the time this stuff is hiding in plain sight. Just because someone or someone's is being looked into doesn't necessarily mean all Christians are being persecuted or it's going to suddenly be illegal to be Christian in this country. Again, narrative, reality, we're trying to talk in the Delta. So this video is a lot of place in my sequence. And I don't think the next one is what... No. That's down. That now we're down off to economics. That was going to be the next layer of that. That when you're targeting extremists, you have to target them wherever they are. And for better or for worse, a lot of really far-right extremists are in churches. If you want far-left extremists, you look in the environmental movement. Or climate change movement. For the far-right extremists, they're oftentimes church-going sort of thing. And there was one kid who did something terrible that had a rosary, and that was what kind of got them into looking at Orthodox Catholicism and all this type of thing. And if you're curious as to what some people are plotting, Joel Webbin has just told us that, the virtuous, ambitious, masculine men have to climb the ladder of power and forcibly take away from the people that which is their detriment. Never has anything been so elitist ever in life. And that's the type of extremism that definitely, in my opinion, and people may disagree with me on this, in my opinion, should 110% never ever be anywhere near power. And ironically, he's commented here, universal suffrage is evil. Virtue is of greater value than freedom. And this is the type of thing where it's very easy to start painting with broad brushes and stoke people up into fear. And sometimes that's legit. Like with the abortion people, things were not done properly. That was bad. When you're looking at extremists, you have to go where they are to see if they're going to try to harm greater society, the greater democratic project. And these days, you don't even have to look that far. I'm finding this on Twitter. And it's so meta, he's commenting on it. Like, it's, so, and you also, see other, other people saying, either trying to, agree with it, counter. I mean, the comment section is just a trash fire. And so not every investigation is always a problem. Not that I trust the government that much, because I don't. Not that I don't think that there's a lot of overreach, because there is. Not that we don't low-key live in a surveillance state, because high-key that we do. But I'm also very sensitive to narrative and how things are talked about. And this whole thing is kind of very important to think about, not just practically, but narratively. I think it's also interesting that they're not saying this stuff out loud. For your consideration. All right, now, we're not going to get to everything tonight. So, this is deep economics. Let's save that for the newsletter on Saturday. That's tungsten, and, this is the everything conspiracy. Oh my goodness. Which was so important. Oh, Scott Jennings, we don't care. This, let's just watch this because it's entertaining.
Going to put us trillions and trillions of dollars more in debt. I was only a few years old while you were in the administration defending prior endless wars. Now this war is failing.
8 weeks is endless to you?
Okay, you said it was going to be 4 to 6 weeks.
You have the attention span of a gnat?
Homie, I debated you on TV 4 to 6 weeks ago, and you said we were weeks away from it. Now you're making condescending remarks because you can't defend the fact that this war is not going your way. Wait, one more time.
Not going your way.
Name one political concession. Name one political concession.
Hey, whoa,
Honestly, I'm not going to have this guy's
Everybody, hang tight,
Honestly.
okay? No, everybody calm down, okay? We're having a debate. You can respond to the points that he's making.
Can you name a political concession that we've got?
We had a flashback to the war the skinheads had in my studio.
I would be mad if I
Okay.
had to defend war too. I would be mad if I had to defend war.
Scott, you can respond.
We have
and
a
then
very
we'll move
simple. We have a very simple goal: to keep terrorists and a terrorist regime from having a nuclear weapon that can threaten the United States, our interests in the region, our allies in Europe, anybody else
So
in
you
the world.
can't answer the question.
That is,
Thank
that
you.
is
I
our
would get
goal.
mad too.
All right, we're going to leave it there, guys. Next for us, the president suggests ABC.
So, yeah, Scott Jennings had a falling out on CNN. It was funny. I just found out about Scott Jennings, by the way. Like, it's, someone told me about him, because I don't watch CNN. I don't watch cable news. If you're a long-time watcher of the show, you know I'm not a huge fan of cable news. They have very little of anything of value to say. And a lot of what they say is wrong. So we don't tend to watch them very much. But we're nearing the end. My throat is tired. I have Iran's 14-point proposal. We'll see if that is sticky. We have the Silicon Valley underclass. We have the California trans thing. And all this is very heavy. So rather than try to do all that tonight after an hour and 3 minutes when it's been a very long day and I have a long week ahead, I want to remind everyone to please make sure to come to the salon on Thursday, May 7th, Outrage Journalism with David Beckemeyer. If you need a private invite to this private event, please email me, email@CameronJournal.com, and I will invite you privately because it's an entirely private event. We're not broadcasting this, anything like that. It is a private event. So email@CameronJournal.com. Please follow me on social media, at Cameron Cowan on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, at Cameron Journal on TikTok and Blue Sky, at Cameron Cowan on Instagram as well. I'll be back here Wednesday for The Living Joke. Thursday, we're having Outrage Journalism, so I hope to see you there. Again, email me for your private invite. You can also check my Substack newsletter, CameronJournal.substack.com. There's a link to the invite in the latest post, which is Saturday's newsletter. And I'll see you here next Monday at 7 p.m. for the news. New edition of the newsletter will be out on Saturday. We're having Outrage Journalism on Thursday. Connor and will be here to talk about fun stuff on Wednesday for The Living Joke, your favorite afternoon zoo show, which will be really a lot of fun. And we're going to be talking about W this week and all sorts of fun stuff. So, my name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal News Hour. Thank you so much for watching. And don't forget The world is hard. This is not.